This happened to me in the fall of 2021 when I was working part-time as a food delivery driver in upstate New York. I'd picked up the job to help pay off some student loans, mostly doing DoorDash and Uber Eats in the evenings after my classes. It was decent money, and most of the time the work was uneventful, just driving around quiet suburbs, dropping off food, and listening to podcasts in between. That night was cold and rainy. I remember it because my windshield wipers were making that awful squeaking noise the whole time, and I kept having to wipe condensation off the inside of the glass. It was a Thursday. Around 10:30 p.m., I got a ping for a McDonald's delivery. The pickup was just off Route 44, and the drop-off was about 15 minutes out, in a more rural area I hadn't really driven to before. The customer had tipped well in the app, and I didn't think twice. The McDonald's was nearly empty when I arrived. A bored-looking employee handed me a brown paper bag and a drink tray, and I was back on the road within 5 minutes. The GPS routed me through a few back roads, narrow two-lane stretches lined with trees, barely lit except for the occasional porch light. The rain made everything hazy, and the further I drove, the less I saw of other cars. I finally reached the destination, a small, old-looking house tucked into a wooded property off Hollow Creek Road. The driveway was long and curved sharply, ending in front of a single porch light that buzzed faintly. The house looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Vinyl siding, storm windows, cracked steps. I parked and walked up with the bag in one hand, the drinks in the other. There was no doorbell, just one of those old metal knockers that you had to lift and drop. I gave it two light taps. No answer. I waited, tried again. Still nothing. I was about to call the number listed on the order when I heard something inside. Slow footsteps creaking across a hardwood floor. I stepped back instinctively, trying to make myself visible under the porch light. Then the door opened. A man stood there, late 40s, maybe early 50s, tall, pale. His hair was slicked back like it had just been wet. He was wearing a white tank top and pajama pants, even though it was freezing out. "Order for a Tyler?" I said. He didn't respond at first, just looked at the bag in my hand. Then he gave a tiny nod and took it from me without a word. Didn't touch the drinks, didn't say thank you. As I turned to go back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder. He was still standing there, holding the bag, staring at me. Not moving. I got in the car, pulled a U-turn in the driveway, and started heading back the way I came. For some reason, I couldn't shake the weirdness of that encounter. Maybe he was just socially awkward or tired, but there was something off. Then I got a text. It was from the delivery app. "You left drinks." I glanced at the tray in my passenger seat. Sure enough, I'd forgotten to give him the sodas. I sighed, made a three-point turn, and headed back. When I pulled up again, the porch light was off. I walked up to the door, drinks in hand, and knocked again. This time, no sound of footsteps, no creaking. No one came. I waited, knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed something through the side window, a flicker of movement, like a shadow passing in the hallway. I stepped off the porch and looked around. The house was dead quiet. No TVs, no lights. But that shadow, it had definitely moved. I was about to call the number again when I heard something else. A knock. Not from the door. From the side of the house. 3 slow knocks, spaced out. I stood frozen, listening. Then again, from the back. 3 more knocks. It didn't make any sense. Was someone trying to prank me? Was this guy playing games? I started backing toward my car. That's when I noticed the drinks in my hand were wet, like they'd been out in the rain. But I hadn't dropped them. They hadn't left the car. I got back in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw someone standing in the tree line, just beyond the edge of the headlights. They weren't facing me. They were facing the house, just standing there. I didn't stop. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. When I got home, I reported the address through the app, flagged it as unsafe. I didn't get any response. A few days later, I was talking to a guy I know who also does delivery in that area. I mentioned the road, and he immediately stopped me. "Don't take orders to Hollow Creek," he said. "That place hasn't had power in years. Nobody lives there." I checked the order history. It had disappeared from my app, but I still have the receipt and the drinks. They're still in my fridge. And the next morning, one of the soda lids had been torn off from the inside. This happened to me in the fall of 2021 when I was working part-time as a delivery driver for a local pizza place in upstate New York. I was 24, living in a small apartment above a laundromat, and most nights were uneventful, just the usual routine of dropping off food to half-asleep customers in sweatpants. It was a Friday night, and the air had that sharp chill that comes right before winter. The rush had died down around 11:30 p.m., and I was hoping to close up soon. That's when the last order of the night came in, 2 large pepperoni pizzas and a bottle of root beer. The address was a bit outside town, near an area called Old Creek Road. I didn't think much of it. We got the occasional order from out there, usually from families living in the older farmhouses. The drive took about 20 minutes. Once I turned onto Old Creek, the streetlights stopped, and it was just my headlights cutting through the dark. The road narrowed, flanked by tall, bare trees. The GPS told me the house was a little further ahead, but I noticed there were no numbers on the mailboxes, just rusted metal posts leaning into the ditch. I finally spotted what looked like the address, a long, cracked driveway that disappeared into the woods. The house at the end was barely lit, with just one dim bulb glowing over the front porch. I pulled up, grabbed the pizzas, and stepped out. That's when I noticed something. There was no car in the driveway, no sound from inside, no signs of life at all. Still, I knocked on the door and called out, "Pizza delivery." A moment passed. Then from somewhere deeper in the house, I heard faint footsteps, slow, heavy. They stopped just behind the door. I waited, expecting it to swing open, but it didn't. Instead, a low male voice, calm, almost whispering, asked, "How did you find this place?" I froze. I stammered something about the order being placed online. But before I could finish, the voice said, "You shouldn't be here." I backed away toward my car, trying to laugh it off like maybe it was just some weird joke. That's when the porch light went out. I was plunged into darkness. I could still hear movement inside, but it was faster now, heavier, coming toward the door. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran back to my car, dropped the pizzas on the passenger seat, and tore out of the driveway. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost missed the turn back to the main road. When I got back to the restaurant, I told my manager what happened. He frowned and said, "That address, we've had trouble with that before, but we took it off the delivery list months ago." I showed him the order ticket, and he went pale. It didn't have a phone number, and the timestamp was strange, printed as 12:01 a.m., even though it was still before midnight. I never drove out to Oak Creek Road again. But sometimes late at night, I think about that man's voice. Calm, close, asking how I found him. And I still wonder who or what was waiting for me to step inside. This happened in the fall of 2021 when I was working as a night delivery driver for a small local restaurant in upstate New York. It was around 11:45 p.m., and I had just finished my second to last order for the night. My boss told me there was one more delivery just a little outside of town, about 15 minutes from the restaurant. I remember thinking it was strange that someone was ordering that late, especially on a Tuesday, but I didn't question it. Tips were usually better at night. The address was on a road I'd never been to before, Carver Lane. It wasn't on my GPS at first, so I had to look it up through a different map app. The directions showed a narrow, winding road off the main highway leading into a heavily wooded area. The customer had paid online, so all I had to do was drop it off. I left the restaurant and drove into the night. The streets were quiet, most houses dark. Once I turned off the highway, the road got rough and uneven, with no streetlights. The only light came from my headlights bouncing off the trees. After about 5 minutes, I saw the sign for Carver Lane. It was barely hanging on one hinge. The letters almost faded away. The houses here were far apart, hidden behind trees. Most didn't even have visible driveways. The number I was looking for was 142, but the mailbox numbers skipped all over the place. Eventually, I saw it, a narrow gravel driveway disappearing into the woods. I pulled in slowly. The driveway was long, maybe 200 feet, with trees closing in on both sides. At the end, there was a small, single-story house with its porch light on. The siding was old, peeling, and there were no cars in the driveway. I grabbed the food, walked up to the porch, and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. I could hear faint movement inside, like soft footsteps, but no one opened the door. "Hello, delivery for, Sarah?" I called out. The footsteps stopped. There was a long silence. Then the porch light went out. I froze. My eyes were still adjusting, but I could see faint light flickering from inside, like a candle or maybe a TV far in the back. I didn't know whether to leave the food and go or knock again. I decided to knock one more time, just to be sure. This time, I heard the sound of something sliding across the floor. It was slow, heavy, like a piece of furniture being dragged. Then a voice, soft, almost whispering, came from the other side of the door. "Come in." Every instinct in me screamed no. I stepped back instead and said, "I can just leave it here." Silence again. Then I heard the sound of breathing, deep and steady, right against the other side of the door. I put the bag of food down on the mat, turned, and started walking back to my car. That's when I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't want to look, but I did. The door was open just a few inches. In the gap, I could see an eye, wide, unblinking, watching me. I got into my car as calmly as I could, started the engine, and backed out of that driveway faster than I should have. When I reached the highway again, I finally let myself breathe. The next day, I told my boss about it, mostly as a weird story. He checked the order records and frowned. There was no order for that address in the system. No Sarah. Nothing. Sometimes late at night, I think about that voice telling me to come in, and the sound of someone dragging something across the floor, like they were getting ready for me.